Hello. In this session, we will begin discussion on the behavior of compression members. And initially, we will consider members which are under pure compression. We will not consider bending, which we will consider in a separate session. So, we will begin to discuss how compression members behave in general. So, first thing, of course, is where these compression members are used. And columns of any building are primarily compression members. So, they carry the gravity load with them. So they are primarily compression members. So the building frames have a large number of compression members. Similarly, trusses have members which are under pure compression. And there can be other examples. For example, a boom of a crane, something which is used to hoist things up at greater heights. So all of these are examples of members which are primarily under compression. Of course, some of them undergo bending as well. But the bending behavior we will consider a little later. So let us try to see under pure compression, what are the things which can happen. Now, if we consider the behavior in tension versus compression, they broadly may appear to be the same, right? So if we consider a bar as shown here, one is under tension and let's say the same bar is put under a pure compressive force. Recall that Fy is the yield strength of the material. So in case of mild steel, it will be let's say around 250 megapascals. So the total tensile force which this can carry in tension before yielding will be Fy times A, where A is the area of cross section. And since steel has the same behavior in tension and compression in terms of material behavior, right? So the stress strain behavior of steel is same in tension and compression. So for that reason, in compression also, the maximum compressive force which this member can take before yielding will be Fy times A. Just that in this case now Fy is the compressive yield strength. And since the behavior is same in tension and compression, this compressive and tensile yield strengths will be same. So Fy in both cases will be let's say 250 megapascals. Okay. Now there are few things which make a large difference between design of tension and design of compression members. One is let's say the presence of bolts, right? So in case of tension members, we saw that the presence of bolts can have a significant effect. That in fact introduced a different kind of failure state. So one of the failure state which this equation represents, this is primarily yielding of the gross section. But when there were holes which were meant to accommodate the bolts or rivets, now these holes introduced an additional limiting state of failure, which was rupture of the net section, right? So this was because in case of tension, the effective area which was resisting tension was significantly reduced because of the holes, and also there were effects of stress concentration. So stress concentration is caused when there is a hole, and if you apply a tensile stress in the far field, we saw that near the holes the stresses can be as much as 3 times higher than the far away stresses. So this was the reason where tension members were very prone to changes due to the presence of bolts, in fact presence of holes. Now in case of compression members, if you look at this image, the overall behavior is not going to change because of the presence of holes, because this entire section will act as one, because when it is being compressed, the bolt itself will act as part of the compression member. Okay, so the presence of bolts was significant for tension members, but it will not be so much significant for compression members. Okay, so this is one major difference. Next is the presence of initial out of plumbness or initial imperfection. The initial out of plumbness is primarily due to the initial manufacturing defect, right? So although we intend to make a straight member, due to manufacturing process and differential cooling down and a variety of other things that can happen during the manufacturing, most of these members will have some kind of an initial out of plumbness, which means instead of being straight, they will have an initial bent shape. Okay. Now, if we take a member with an initial bent shape, right, and if we apply a tensile force on it, so If we consider a member which has an initial out of plumbness, which means initially it is, let's say, bent like this. Now on this member, if a tensile force is applied, it will tend to straighten it, right? So if we apply a tensile force, if we pull on this, although it was initially bent, it will become straight. Whereas if it has an initial out of plumbness, and if we apply a compressive force, that is going to increase the that bend, right? So basically, in compression, an initial out of plumbness can significantly uh, increase the failure in that sense. So the effect of initial out of plumbness is negligible for tension members, but it can be extremely significant for compression members. Similarly, when we were designing and discussing tension members, we said the slenderness ratio did not have much of a role, right? Primarily because slenderness ratio was not governing the strength in any way for the tension members. It was just provided to ensure there are no unwanted vibrations, and in case of stress reversal, it remains same. However, in case of compression members, the slenderness can have an extremely significant effect. So again, if we start with a long and slender member, and this experiment you can very quickly do at your own place as well. Just take any long ruler, which say that this is a 1 foot ruler. If if you just hold it in your hands and compress it, apply a compressive force, right? You will see that it will begin to bend like that, right? So even though we are applying a compressive force, this compressive force is causing a bending, okay? And this bending will further lead to elastic buckling. So this is what is elastic buckling or flexural buckling, right? So this elastic buckling can play a very important role for compression members, so much so that it can actually completely change the failure modes. So the failure mode which we saw earlier, this one where the compressive maximum force is, let's say, given by the yield strength times the area, this is one failure mode. But since the slenderness can play a very important role, and this you would have studied in your mechanics course as well, by the name of Euler buckling. Now if the slenderness ratio is large, Euler buckling can play a very important role, and it can completely change the failure mode of the compression member. Okay, so the first mode of failure is called squashing, which is failure due to exceeding of the yield stress, right? So for a compression member, the yield load under pure compression can be defined as Fy times A as earlier, and the failure will occur when Q, which is the applied load or the load effect, becomes more than the yield load, right? So when Q becomes greater than Py, this member can fail under pure compression, but by squashing, by exceeding the yield stress of the material. But now we know that effect of slenderness ratio is important in the compression members. So the other mode of failure can be triggered when the elastic buckling or the flexural buckling takes place, right? And then you may recall the Euler buckling formula. So we are not going to do a full derivation here because it is usually covered in all mechanics courses. So the critical buckling load is given by this expression, where the L is the length of the member and K is something which takes into consideration the end effects, right? So for example, a pin end will have K equal to 1, right? And a fixed free end, so for a cantilever system, K will be equal to 2. So there are different configurations which are possible, and for them different K values are possible. So K times L collectively is called the effective length, right? Now from the critical buckling load, we can calculate the critical buckling stress, or FCR, by simply dividing PCR divided by area, right? So the critical buckling stress is calculated in terms of the slenderness ratio. This lambda here is the slenderness ratio, which is defined as the effective length, which is, so L effective is simply K times L. So effective length divided by R, where R is the radius of gyration, which is defined like so, right? So one important thing to note here is that the squashing failure or failure due to yield stress does not depend at all on the elastic properties, right? So it doesn't depend on the Young's modulus, for example. Similarly, the failure due to elastic buckling or flexural buckling, that does not depend on the yield stress, right? So it depends only on E, which is the Young's modulus. It does not depend on the uh, yield stress of the material. Okay, so now we need to define, or we can define that if the critical buckling load PCR is more than the yield load PY, or if the critical buckling stress is more than the yield stress, right? In that case, yielding will occur first, right? So yielding load is lower than the critical load, so yielding will occur first, and in this case squashing will be the limit state of failure, right? And conversely, if the yield loads is more than the critical buckling load, then buckling will occur first, and in that case flexural buckling will be the limit state. So this is how the two different limit states of failure can be triggered in a column. So primarily what we are seeing is that it depends on the relative value of the buckling stress and the yield stress. Okay, and we will then relate it to the slenderness ratio. It can be attributed as to certain limits of the slenderness ratio. So this was about the behavior of compression members. Now we will begin to quantify in the next sessions. We will begin to quantify the strengths with respect to slenderness ratios.